There's some long faces out there, you guys. This is the last one of today. You guys are almost done. I popped in on a couple of the previous sessions, and they were a little stressful. It seemed like, right? I mean, it seemed like a couple of them were like, a bit of a downer. And so you guys are probably at this point feeling like, I don't really know what I want to do. This is kind of crazy, and there's only one more session. I better figure it out in that last one, or this day has been a total waste. But that's not what this panel is about. We hope this is pretty different from all the other panels. We've got a pretty amazing collection of people here. And we're going to go through and do some quick introductions. You'll see that each one is doing something that they love, and they're doing something professionally that they've been interested in personally for a long time. And as you sit there and you think about, I mean, you guys haven't even figured out what you're majoring in, let alone what you want to do after school. So it's really not fair to ask you to figure that out today, this year, in the next year. What you're going to see is we've all zigzagged around, but what we've come to is figure out there are certain things we love doing, and we can actually make that work professionally as well. So the things that you guys are actually interested in outside of school, outside of your classes, outside of what you just went to as a previous session, the things that you think about all the time, whether it's music or art or whatever it is, there are ways that you can make that work as a career, even if you come from a university that doesn't teach a single class in that area, right? And a lot of you are here because you have interests that aren't covered by the classes, by the core, by the electives, by even by some of the groups, right? I mean, I was talking to someone who was really into architecture or graphic design, right? And those things, you can't find a class at the U of C about that. But we're all doing things in those fields, and we want to tell you about it. So we're going to do some quick introductions. You have our histories. Maybe you read through them, maybe not. I want each panelist to kind of introduce themselves quickly, tell you a bit about what they do today, maybe a little bit about how they got there or what they did at Chicago. But we're going to move pretty quickly because I want to turn things over to you guys as quickly as possible. Because I heard from at least one of the other panels just before this, not a single question was asked. Another one that I was in, there was just a couple, and I want this one to be, the vast majority of it, to be about your questions and what you guys are actually interested in, thinking about, concerned about, have questions about, want to pick the brains of any of these people up here. So start thinking about the questions. But first, let's do some quick introductions. We'll start down here.
My name is Sam Hunt. I graduated in 2003. I was a geography major, and now I'm a booking agent for bands. So I plan tours for bands. I figure out how much they're going to get paid, where they're going to play, and when. It has absolutely nothing to do with what I studied in school, other than the fact that I look at a map all day long, which any geography major will tell you is not what geography is about. I don't know if geography is still even a department at University of Chicago. I worked at record stores through high school and college. I always loved music. That was what I was really interested in, more so than anything that was happening in school. I interned at a record label in Chicago when I moved here. I was enchanted by the Chicago music scene, and I got a job there during and after college. And then, I sort of took the opportunities that presented themselves, became an assistant to someone who started an agency, learned what he did, and that's what I've done for the past 4 or 5 years. And it's a lot of work, but it's really fun and rewarding, and I still love music, and I still love working with music and musicians, and I like going to concerts and going to festivals and meeting people, and it's pretty neat.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Jordan Schiff. I'm the communications manager at Urban Outfitters. Does anybody here shop there? All right. Now we're talking. It's kind of a marketing role. I do a lot with social media, a little bit with investor relations. Basically, how we want to have conversations with everyone who shops at our stores as friends, because it's a pretty casual place. I studied public policy at the University of Chicago. I didn't do a whole lot with that, but it taught me a lot, and I think helps inform how I approach my job today. I think if I were in school right now, I would totally go to something like this. I would absolutely be sitting where you are in this panel, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I relate, and can't wait to hear your questions.
Hi guys, I'm Victoria Hong. I'm today a fashion designer. I studied fundamentals when I was in school. My career path definitely was not a straight shot. I thought I was going to go into academia, applied to grad schools, had a chunk of time before I was going back to school, and decided to go to Paris, City of Lights. I'd always had this romantic dream of visiting Europe and living in Paris. So I finagled somehow a student visa, and while I was in Paris, actually became employed by an American news agency. And rather than going back to school, I ended up staying in Paris for about 3.5 years, working for an American news agency, and then being transferred eventually to Brussels to cover the European institutions. And then at the ripe old age of 28, I decided that what I actually wanted to do was fashion design. So I went back to school, went to Parsons, got another degree in fashion design, worked in the industry for a while, had a sort of a blip on my career on Project Runway, and then launched my own collection about 3 years ago.
Hi, I'm Scott Sherman. I'm a writer for the Colbert Report on Comedy Central. I hope you guys watch it. I've written a few books too. Before that, I wrote for another show on Comedy Central, and I wrote for The Onion for a little bit. And when I was here, I was working at Second City, doing anything they would let me do, and I was a fundies major as well.
A what major?
A fundamentals major.
Fundies.
Sorry.
No, you said fundies?
Fundies.
Oh, that was,
It's a shorthand. It's
got it.
the
I got
fun,
it. I got it now.
cool way we talk about our major.
I'm Aaron Ackerman. I am the third fundamentals major in a row. This is a total coup. There's like 3 a year, and somehow 3 of your panelists have this major. My career's kind of bounced around a bit. After fundamentals, naturally, I went into strategy consulting. The way it happened actually was I interviewed for this job, and I ended up with a partner who had been a professor at Stanford, and he was a philosophy professor. So we ended up talking about my major for the entire time, nothing related to work. And so he liked that. So it actually did get me a job. But after doing that for a couple years, I realized that what I was really interested in, what I was thinking about, what I was spending all my weekends and nights doing was learning about design and art and architecture. So I went to work for a design firm in New York, a web design company. And then I went to a product design company after that, found ways to be useful at both of those places, and then went to grad school at Berkeley. And then I went to work for Apple about 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, Apple was not the company that you guys know today. It was small. The iPad had just come out. It was like just kind of coming back from the brink of bankruptcy, basically. And I worked on the iPod for a couple years, then worked on iPhone for 2 years, and now I work on the iPad. And specifically, I work for the in-house design team that we have that design our website, all the emails you guys get from Apple, everything you see in an Apple retail store, the actual boxes, the packaging that you get when you bring the product home. So we think about communications a little differently, and it's an amazing group to be part of. So happy to tell you more about that.
Excuse me. My name is Lonnie Stonich. I'm class of 81. I graduated in 82. I was on the 5-year plan, which was quite common back then. I don't know if you guys are allowed to have a 5-year plan anymore, but we did. 6-year, 7-year, 8-year plan to get through undergrad. There was no such thing as fundies back when I was in school, but I was in the precursor perhaps to fundies, which was the Committee on the General Studies in the Humanities, which was at the time one of only a handful of interdisciplinary majors at the school. You applied at the end of your 2nd year. You had to have a certain GPA and an idea about your BA paper. And then you picked 3 areas of concentration that were from within the university that were not satisfied within any other major. So the 3 areas of my concentration in descending order were aesthetics, linguistics, and Greek philosophy. So that's what I ended up majoring in, and became very good at cocktail parties, which is rule number 1, become really good at cocktail parties. It's helpful. I have had a very long and winding road of careers, but basically have fallen into 3 categories. I'm not going to count the ones that were filler, that were just to earn money. Those things I usually were either fired or quit from, usually fired. I got fired a lot, so it's good to develop a tolerance to being fired. I should have, though, perhaps developed a better skill at quitting before getting fired, but, sometimes I was, let out the door, so I didn't always know I was being fired. Basically, loosely, my career has 3 arcs. I have always been a writer. I have a pretty strong skill as a writer. It's probably the thing that got me into the U of C. That and my brother, who was 15 when he started school here, came with me, so I was always pretty sure that they let me in to watch him. So I always kind of felt like he was the one they always wanted, not really me. But I was always a very strong writer when I came. I pursued a writing career concomitantly with 2 other things. I wrote for magazines and mostly in the Chicago area, mostly art, fashion, photography, oversized, glossy magazines. I did cultural criticism, art criticism, interview, format, that kind of thing. Loved magazine work, still love magazine work. So that's thread A. Thread B is a clothing design. I taught myself how to sew back in 1984 and formed a collective with 5 other University of Chicago students. We had been doing performance art in the city. We were the first naked performers in the windows at Limelight when Limelight first opened in the city, so we all performed nude a whole lot. Did a lot of very interesting performance art in the city, and so we decided to open up a store. It was going to be a kind of like what is now a pop-up store. We were kind of like the first pop-up store where we decided to open it for just 6 months. We spent a year and a half making the inventory. All the inventory was one-of-a-kind items. And most everything, we never went to a fabric store. Everything we went to Salvation Army and took apart other clothing and repurposed the clothing. So we opened that in 1984 and set it up as a 6-month expiration date. So we had an opening and a closing party. We sold everything we made. So I taught myself how to sew, and that branched into, at a later point, a career. I started a separate career as did children's clothing. I called it No Pink, No Blue. I was very much out of a punk rock tradition back in, when I graduated, it was height of punk rock, and so it was very much subversive alternative culture. So I started making these clothing of No Pink, No Blue, and do mostly custom design. I still do it, custom design children clothing, really one-off pieces. I don't do a line of anything. I sell to people individually. The third line of creative domain that I have is that I am a painter. I'm a fine art painter. I taught myself how to paint. I had no art classes whatsoever at the U of C other than theory of art and creation. I had no studio art class while I was here. I taught myself how to paint in 1984. I'm an oil painter. I paint people, figurative work, and I've sold about 600 pieces at this point to this point. I'm not affiliated with any gallery. I sell directly to people, one-on-one commission work, so I keep all of the money. All of those stories have very odd backstories to them, as you might imagine. I've done a lot of grunt work. I've done a lot of really crazy work. I've worked as a paralegal doing Cook County property tax appeals. I've worked, done stuff that, I've done a lot of strange stuff. I was a manager for a gentleman who is one of the top interior designers in Chicago. I ran his business for him for quite some time. He's one of my best friends. So it's always that duality for many creative people where they have their day job, which brings in their money, and then they have their art, which doesn't always bring in what we'll call consistent money, like how the landlord likes that consistent payment. Sometimes art can flux, and so sometimes it's feast or famine many times. So I always had a day job that wasn't necessarily hugely prestigious, and then I had my whole kind of wild life. I didn't really settle down. I got married at 40, had a kid at 41. I'm 51 now, and I'm still kind of I do things in a bit of an alternative way. I currently live in Evanston. My son is in 4th grade, and he's at a private school in Winnetka, and I'm in charge of a not-for-profit organization in New Trier Township, which is Winnetka, Wilmette, Kenilworth, Glencoe. And what I do is I bring in public intellectuals from around the country to talk to parents and educators and psychologists and psychiatrists, social workers about issues of child development of kids ages 3 to 20. So I look a lot at well-being of youth, particularly adolescents, what makes a well-functioning child, how can you succeed as a student, and how can parents figure out some way to minimize the amount of stress and anxiety that your generation is feeling about both their careers and their personal lives. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know it's a lot, but moving on to my new friend Jerry here.
Hi, Jerry Blumenthal. I graduated as an undergraduate, and I got a master's degree many, many years ago, before a lot of these guys here that I'm up on the panel with. But interesting that this Fundies program that many of the panelists seem to have been in, and the Committee on General Studies, which Lonnie was in, I was in also back in the late 50s and early 60s, and I studied literature and philosophy were my two areas of interest on the Committee on General Studies. And I got, as I say, I got a BA and then an MA. And I think it's no accident, and it's very interesting to me that here we are, talking to people who have pursued careers in the arts and entertainment in various capacities, but so many of us were in programs that gave us a tremendous amount of freedom, perhaps too much freedom, at times, in trying to figure out who we were and what we wanted to do. But clearly, they helped promote a kind of passion or an interest in something that somehow stuck to you, and whatever winding path you went down, as I've heard a lot of the stories here, they all seem to, even though they were winding paths and multiple paths, they sort of converged, and where they converged is in what you wanted to do. Don't let anybody tell you not to do what you want to do. A lot of people have told me not to do what I want to do in my life as a filmmaker, which I eventually became after having graduated, and I was a very academic type, pretty good writer. I wrote essays that were published. I wrote poetry. And I became a teacher, and I taught in a couple of different capacities. I taught freshman English, I taught humanities at the city colleges, and I began to see and there was one other seed besides my fundamental sort of classical education at the university, which was, very diverse and unfocused in a way, but nonetheless gave me a lot of fundamentals. I was also a member of the Doc Films group, and became interested in film. And I thought that one way to escape the drudgery of just teaching humanities or English year after year and watching the students stay younger while I became older and completing the same, and teaching the same books and whatever, I thought that maybe there was a way to escape this by going back to school and getting a PhD and continuing as a writer, as a critic. I was very interested in film history and film theory, and I went back to school at Northwestern after having taught for about 4 or 5 years, and to study film history and criticism and get a PhD. And during that year, I got roped into making a documentary film, and that was the end. In other words, all of this went around and came around, and it sort of finally ended up where I didn't know I wanted to be. Okay, I didn't know that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I thought that I wanted to be a writer, and I was, and it was good, and it prepared me for a lot. I learned a lot about film. My education at the University of Chicago gave me a very broad-ranging interest in sort of fundamental knowledge of the civilization that we rested on. And I had, again, there's luck. There were a couple of guys from the University of Chicago whom I knew. One of them I knew from high school, and I sort of knew him from college too. The other one was a little younger, and I didn't know him at all. They had started a little film company out in Hyde Park, had their offices up on the 8th floor of the Hyde Park Bank Building on Lake Park and 53rd. And they had made a documentary about a home for the aged out on the south side, the Drexel home, called Home for Life, which when I saw it just blew me away. The possibility of following people over time in real situations and constructing a moving, emotional, human narrative that at the same time had a kind of social context so that you could apply it to various political and social situations. And it became not just a moving document, but also a useful document, something that could plug in to work that people were doing, to organizing that people were doing. And as I said, I sort of like got involved in making a student film at Northwestern University, which turned out to be a film about someone who went on to become a famous feminist writer, Shulamith Firestone, who was at the time a student at the Art Institute. And I said, well, maybe I ought to take this film over to these guys and show it to them and see what they think. And they said, what do you want to do? Do you want to become like an old fart professor, or do you want to be a filmmaker? And I had to make a rather important decision at the time. And some people told me hey, these guys don't have any money. They're making documentaries. Documentaries don't make any money. How are you gonna, well, I did it. And I received salary for about a couple of months. And then one of the guys, Gordon, who has remained my partner for the last 40-some years, said, well, how would you like to be a partner? And I became a partner in the company, and that's what I've been doing for the last 40 years, is making social documentaries.
Cool. So, not your typical set of panelists, right? Pretty broad range of people. Very different experiences. A lot of fundamentals majors, but other than that, we've all done really different things. I think one thing that unites a lot of us is we didn't know as undergrads what we would be doing, on this panel as we sit here today. A lot of us figured it out afterwards, but we did things as undergrads that I think helped set us up to make those discoveries later on. So I want to get to your questions, and I know you guys have been very patient, sitting there all day. You had the lunch conversations. Our table was great. I hope you guys got to ask some kind of general questions, but if you're here, you're probably interested in at least some of the stories, some of the things you've heard from the people here. So I want to turn it over to you guys and see what's on your mind. What kind of things do you want to hear from the people here? There is a microphone. It's not a huge room, but so everyone can hear your question, just grab the microphone and speak into that. Go ahead.
My question, I guess, is for everyone. It's about self-promotion and effective strategies for kind of drawing attention to your work, and what you have all found successful and not so successful.
Good question. Let's take
Anybody
that.
want to take it?
I was just going to say, I think if you do a really good job at what you do, people generally find out about you, and don't be too annoying if you're self-promoting.
There's a little wrinkle to that, to your question, which is that given what we were doing at Cartemquin Films, which was forming a kind of collective group to make films that had political and social impact, the question of self-promotion became almost like a dirty word. In other words, we had sessions early on when we were a collective back in the 70s. We had sessions where we'd have these huge arguments about, well, should we put credits on the film at all? Okay.
Right.
And everybody sort of did everything, and everybody wanted to be sort of part of a collective group that was responsible for the thing. And it was a little bit of a cocoon universe. We needed very little money to live at the time. We were all very young and very idealistic, and things were cheaper, a lot cheaper. And I did things back then on virtually no salary that I couldn't even imagine doing now on whatever it is that I make, as a relatively successful professional. Anyway, self-promotion is a funny kind of thing, depending upon where you take what you're passionate about. It might be something you want to take a second look at. It's what you're about is not self-promotion, but realizing yourself. On the other hand, realistically, pragmatically, you have to promote yourself in some way to make sure that people know who you are and what you could do, and what you deserve credit for, which becomes an issue, has become much more of a sort of a conventional issue in the filmmaking that we've done over the years. Now it's like everybody gets a credit, and it's very specific.
Yeah, I think in a lot of our fields, we work in teams, we work in very collaborative environments. Sorry, a lot of us, in very different fields, do work in similar environments that are very collaborative, very team-based. Did you want to add something on that one?
I mean,
Go ahead.
First.
I was just going to say that, we tend to collaborate with artists. We find them because they've successfully promoted themselves. And I think one thing that's consistent throughout all of them, just for you, is that, they tend to be very authentic. Their stories are very, very personal. And, to Jerry's point, it's not so much about the promotion, but about themselves. And to the extent that you can do that, I think you'll find more success.
right. Yeah. The work is your promotion. That's at least for me. That's what it came down to. I feel like Sam might be the best equipped being an agent, but I hate self-promotion, but it is a part of the job. I mean, I'm really glad I have agents and managers and all those people doing it sort of for me. But ultimately, what gets you the job is your work. So you have to promote your work sometimes a little bit more than yourself. Although you can't deny, I will now completely contradict myself and say, at least for what I do in a collaborative, artistic environment, people work 80-hour weeks in oftentimes windowless rooms with you, so they need to make sure that you are as talented an artist as you are good a person. So be nice. That's a genuine piece of advice there. Be nice and be a good person and be humble.
All right, another question.
Make a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, no, that sounds stupid, but it's really true that connections and having been there for other people and having paid attention to other people and having showed that you're genuinely interested in other people really gets you someplace.
I would agree with that. I think the other thing, too, is that people can sense when you are passionate about what you're doing. And I think that ties into the concept of authenticity. The sense of the work does speak for itself, but sometimes, like, for example, as a painter, I don't necessarily collaborate. Do you know what I mean? I collaborate perhaps with my client to some extent. I don't match it to the furniture. But to the extent to which not everything is collaborative, although the world, especially if you're sitting up for these panels, you'll think, what if I don't really want to work with 6 other people? It's not really everybody's cup of tea, let's face it. It may be what you've been told is the new reality, and to a certain extent it is probably a new reality, but the pro about collaboration is that, people in general, the human species is an interdependent species. You're not really, John Cacioppo, a good friend of mine, made an interesting remark to me that independence is a political concept, not a biological fact. Biologically, we are not independent entities. Biologically, we are the most interdependent of species practically possible. So the fact that you will need people, and to the extent, to Jerry's point, the extent to which you can develop in your work a sense of both empathy with the people you're working with and your audience, but also a sense of intimacy. Intimacy is a very interesting thing, comes from a source of passion. If you sit and listen to somebody, where people get inspired is when they feel that where you're coming from, they may not like your work, but if you are conveying and I don't mean nutcase passion and the guy on the L screaming. I'm talking about when they get.
Don't be that guy.
Well, yeah. Or if you're going to do it, then do it really well and do it purposefully. But it's that kind of, that development of intimacy, being willing to be vulnerable and intimate in your work environment with people. And again, I don't mean showing your body. I'm talking about being open and flexible, being collaborative, being someone where you don't always have to drive the boat. There is the possibility, and this is very hard for UFC students to understand, you don't always actually have the best idea in the room. Many times you might, but it's not beyond the pale that someone else who did not go to the University of Chicago also has another good idea.
Rarely
Although
happens.
it's unlikely.
Sometimes. On the coast, only on the coast. Somebody else had a question, maybe?
Go ahead.
Hi. I like the phrase that you all figured it out afterwards, since that's
Yeah.
really my plan.
It's a good plan.
But as a second year, I'm just wondering what you did in the meantime.
Yeah. That's a good question. Do you want to start with that? Because music kind of played.
I just sort of took opportunities as they came, other than the very first time when I actively went and tried to get an internship. Beyond that, I never really had a plan or didn't really aggressively go to do things. I specifically did not want to be an agent when I first got into music, but I got tired of being a publicist and the opportunity arose. This guy asked me if I wanted to work for him. I think that your path shows up before you once you start out on it, but that's probably not very useful advice to anyone. That's just how I did it.
Looking back, I can connect the dots really, really easily. When my parents would call and say, what do you want to do? I'd say, I'm thinking about law school, or maybe I want to go into investment banking. What was I doing in my spare time? I worked at the Saks men's store on Michigan Avenue. I read every fashion magazine that I could get my hands on. I just loved it as a subject. It never occurred to me that there was this entire industry that was behind that Saks Fifth Avenue, that there was a very viable career. I just didn't really think about it at that time. I don't really think that I had maybe the maturity to do it. There is kind of a vulnerability, I think, when you really follow what you're passionate about, which I don't think I was ready for then either. But yeah, I mean, it was what I was doing with virtually all of my spare time.
Yeah, being in the environment. I worked at Second City my last 2 years at the U of C, but I do want to emphasize that while you're at the U of C, you're here to go to the U of C, and you're here to get an education, and the career comes after education. So I know I was really eager to start writing for TV my freshman year of college, but that doesn't, I can name 3 guys I know that somehow that started, like they were sort of half writing on shows in their senior years. But that's few and far between. Enjoy your education a lot. And then just in general, be in the environment while you're waiting to get your career going, because that leads to your career.
But also enjoy all the other things, and don't just get stuck enjoying your education. Also enjoy movies and music and plays and art or whatever you're interested in. I think that a lot of people at U of C get caught up in only working on their education, and over the course of 4 years lose whatever passions they may have arrived with.
Victoria? Yeah.
No, I think it's
Victoria,
just a
looking
process
back.
of exploring. Like
Yeah.
just if you don't know what you want to do, try a number of things and try to narrow it down. Try to figure out what it is you absolutely hate doing, and know that you're not going to go into that direction. I think that, I mean, that was my personal experience. I did absolutely everything under the sun, and I ended up doing something that gratified me for a period of time, and then I realized I didn't want to do that anymore, and it took just the time, the process, to figure out what I actually wanted to do. And you won't have that moment as soon as you step off the campus of the UC. It will take time, and it's just trying to find meaningful ways to fill your time in order to get there.
Learn and eliminate, right? If one thing comes out of today, it's probably not going to be like, aha, I know what I want to be. Hopefully, you at least eliminated a couple things that you now know you don't want to be, right? I mean, and you'll do that through internships too. You'll do that through conversations with people after they come back from their internships. You learn about all the different options out there, and you guys have a lot of options. I mean, you can go in so many different directions. It's kind of overwhelming. So part of what you have to do is start honing in on at least the general area of things that you might eventually sort of someday want to be in.
Oh, please, Jerry. Go ahead. Oh, please.
I mean, I'll go if you want me to.
Why don't you? I feel I'm so I'm a mic hog. Go ahead.
No, for those of you who may be sort of in the minority, in a sense, I think I am, in one way, among the panelists, in that I really did know exactly what even though I was a student on the Committee on General Studies and the Humanities, I had 2 majors, blah, blah, blah. I really knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to be a successful and respected intellectual, okay? And
It turned out well.
there was nothing, looking back on that, there was absolutely nothing wrong with that, and that was fine. And I threw myself into it. Even if you know what you want to do, and there probably are quite a few of you out there who do know or think you know what you want to do it. Throw yourself into it with all your passion and all your energy. Don't stint on it. Don't say, well, I'm not so. If you're really sure that you want to do it, then do it. Throw yourself into it. But at the same time, keep yourself open, because something may come up along the way.
Absolutely.
You may pass something on that road that says to you, wait a second, and you need to be open to that too. So, I mean,
That dovetails a little bit.
It's a complicated.
That's, I think, I tried to, when I was younger, I was extremely experimental, and I took a lot of risks. There is no other time. You don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, you probably have some student loan debt, but the bottom line is there is no time that is ever going to be as clear of a field for you to just do something, and who gives a shit what happens at the end of the day. Okay,
do it.
We're the
do
cool
it.
panel. We swear.
We swear, and we're gonna swear again. But part of it is that the idea that try to say yes more than you say no. Try not to presume about what you may or may not necessarily like. You'd be surprised how desires are uncovered. I mean, the bottom line is you guys are, essentially, any neurologist will tell you, you're an adolescent until you're about 27, okay? Your whole prefrontal cortex, you're not even there yet. You're baked yet, okay?
I
You're
am
close.
still totally an adolescent.
See that? Don't use that as an excuse. But the thing is that I try to always say yes. Especially I'm not saying like, oh, somebody offers you a job at Argonne. I clearly was not headed for Argonne. I would not have said yes. But what I'm talking about is even if you're not quite sure, it's surprising how when you make yourself open and available, it's amazing the things that kind of come towards you. And bottom line is, being an artist and a University of Chicago graduate is a tremendously potent combination. You're not an artist from the Art Institute, and we bless them and they're fabulous and whatever, but the bottom line is they don't necessarily think like how you think, okay? They have definitely not had the rigor of the undergraduate academics that you have. When you go, if you want to go work for someone, you want to work, whether it's design, whatever it is, they're going to look at you. If your work is solid and you're a University of Chicago graduate, you are, I can guarantee you, I got a job, it's weird, I got a job as a chef in Boston. With a woman. No, I worked as a chef for 3 years in Boston and Block Island, both during college and after I graduated. I was so burnt out from undergraduate, I went and I worked as a chef. I didn't want to think, I wanted to work 60 hours a week and turn my brain off when I graduated. So that's what I did. I went and I worked as a chef. Where was I headed with that? Where did I start with that? Chef, brain.
Hungry?
No.
Potent combination.
What'd you say, honey?
The potent combination.
Yeah,
rigor,
exactly.
the-
So the interview. At 51, it goes downhill. It really does. Like, where was it? Skewed lines in space. That's what happens. Just like, the interviewer's brother was a divinity student at the University of Chicago. Okay, so she's sitting in Boston. There's like not, and in the chef world, there's no UFC people. I can guarantee you, right? So I'm sitting there. I'm bald. I got stuff glued to my head. I'm looking at her. I'm going to be a chef for you. She had like 10 people, all from the CIA and Johnson & Wales, who were going to be under me, okay? I have 2 years cooking experience, and I'm looking at her, and she said, oh, University of Chicago, I love that place, Divinity School. I spent 45 minutes of my interview. What, you want to talk about the UFC? Let's talk about the UFC. She gave me the job. I was fired about 14 days later. I was a good chef, but I was definitely not someone. I said yes. I probably should have said, like, you're a nice lady, but wow, I really am not qualified for this job. I said yes. The other 12 underneath me looked at me, and you could see it. I walked in, they're like, so where'd you go to school? I said, University of Chicago. They're like, what the hell is that, number one? And number two, oh, I bet you could really cook, And so they spent about 12 of the 14 days completely sabotaging me, doing stuff you can't even imagine. I'd go home, I'd cry and read cookbooks, and I'd wait, like, I'd come to work like a shadow, and one day I broke 50-gallon drum, or 50-gallon container of clam chowder. I broke it. Breaking it means I added the cream too early when it was too hot, and I broke it, and it all went into little fat globules. When you break 50 pounds of chowder, it's really pretty terrible, and they're looking at me, and literally the guy who was directly underneath me, the next second in command, looked at me, and he threw his knife across the room, and he said, I'm walking out of here until she's gone. And I went, I'm a UFC grad. It didn't matter, so this kind of thing, like, so what did that teach me? That teach me, like, whoa, first of all, cooking, unless you own part of the restaurant, don't, oof.
Well, I will do a quick plug. The current White House chef is a UFC
True.
grad.
True that.
So,
True that.
But, just
It's a new world, right?
Something that was said, I kind of want to jump on really quickly, is the great thing about the arts, if that's the direction you think you might be heading, nobody has to give you that job. You can do arts. You can write. You can act. It's kind of healthy to start off sort of thinking, I just want to do it. Because you have that luxury. It's not like you're going to dental school, which you can't like recreationally perform dentistry.
I did have a boyfriend who...
Okay, she's refuting me. but that is really freeing, and you should embrace that. That's really important to remember, is that nobody has to, as long as you're willing to do something else to pay the rent, you can do in the arts whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. And just start from that place.
And also, if you're not good at doing art but still like it, and if you're a
Yeah.
UC grad, you're probably smart enough to do something involving it, like
Art criticism.
yeah.
Well,
Lots of
that's-
things. Most people that work in the music business are failed artists, and I would imagine that's the same for many people that work in industries related to creative
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you don't have to be the artist, the musician, the designer. There are many ways you can help out and bring those designs and those films and the creations of other people to the world, and market them or build them, or make sure that they actually see the light of day. So there are a lot of things you can do. So more questions.
Now,
Wow.
now the
Yeah,
hands are
now
going
they're
up.
coming.
Go towards the back.
Yeah,
maybe.
let's go
Yep.
that.
Hi, my name is Chris. This could be, I guess, applied to any panelist, but it's directed to Mr. Sherman mostly.
Oh God, let's say Scott.
Scott.
I'm
Scott.
not a professor.
That's my dad.
That's his
Um,
dad.
You mentioned that, well, you worked for Second City as an undergrad. You didn't know that many people who actually started writing in comedy or doing satire or whatever until they got out. But do you find in your field, the places you've worked, that most people you encounter did know that that's what they wanted to do when they were college students, or was this
Yeah,
something where they...
and I will say, I actually did know that's what I wanted to do. When I was a fundamentals major, my question was about comedy. I was in off here. I knew right away, I knew very early on that it was something I really did want to do. But there's no clear path. I mean, I work with 11 other writers on staff. None of us had the same experience getting to where we are. That's daunting. It's also freeing. That you just have to be very self-motivated and very self-directed. Yeah, so I knew going to Second City was my ability to be in the environment of professionals and to observe and to watch. And when I was there, I sort of made myself a job as the archivist there, just so I could get paid to read, 45 years of satire.
That's
and-
cool, though.
Yeah,
That's great.
Totally.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So do that.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's weird. I would go to, when I start a job, I didn't mind if what they first had me do for a week was file. Because there's something weird about seeing every piece of paper at an organization. You'd be surprised, especially being a UC person, you'd be surprised what you learn by, I know it sounds weird, learn by filing. But it's true in sense of you really get that sense of the rhythm and pace of what's going on. I mean, 45 years of material, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it shows you.
I mean, I think.
It is amazing, and that's. I mean, I put myself there. I ended up there. There's a Metcalf. I think there still is a Metcalf
Yeah.
Second City, and I didn't get it. But
Another point, right?
but it went to somebody else who was a little older than me. But the producer at Second City asked me, she said, I really like you a lot, and you seem to be very intent on this, so if you want to work for free here during the summer, you can. And so I worked nights during that summer so I could work for free and do that, and then I ended up getting hired after that summer and working there. So don't worry about the money, don't worry about that.
Expect to
just
work for free.
what
Yeah.
Expect to work for
expect
free.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely expect
Yeah, I
to
think
work for
Scott's
free.
story kind of speaks to the creative arts in general, because whatever field you end up in, it's just so competitive, and you need to not only put in the hard work and the dedication, you need to be highly motivated and just have the passion for it in order to do well. I mean, making up your own job and finding a place in a company. That's just so motivated, and so, I mean, he obviously really wanted it and did what he could to get it, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the nerdy jobs.
They actually
We'll
hired a
always do those.
professional archivist after me. 'Cause
That's
they
right.
realized how bad I was.
It's nice if you can illuminate a need they didn't know they had.
You had a question.
So a general trend in the panel has been massive voids in your skill sets after undergraduate education. Like
You have no
Lonnie,
idea how massive.
yeah, Lonnie mentioned painting, Aaron mentioned design, and Jordan mentioned public policy. And some of you went back to school, Sam, Victoria, Aaron. But even for those of you who went back to school, how did you fulfill those voids? Did you read books? Did you find great mentors? How?
That's a good question.
Well, what I
Start.
did going back to school to study film was continue what I was doing, sort of like as a second life for many years before that, which was like watching movies. And I watched movies constantly. I mean, I would go to the Clark Theater when there were 2 features a day, and I would go 7 days a week. And I would come out of the theater during the middle of the day, and after having watched, this is a really incredible moment in my life. I watched this Hitchcock film, Whatever Happened to Harry or something. It's all about these missing corpses. And I come out of the I come out of the Clark Theater downtown in broad daylight, and I said, my car's gone.
Oh.
You know what I mean? It's like you have those experiences where you just immerse yourself in the thing that you want to do. And I know that when I finally discovered that I did have a certain ability to make movies, to actually hands-on do the things that needed to be done to actually make a movie, to tell a story on film, okay? All that stuff is there. Do you know what I'm saying? All of that stuff, all of that groundwork that you put in, it's sort of like training for an athlete. You know what I mean? Your brain is just sort of wired to know that, that's a cut that's never been done. I mean, I've seen this. I've seen it go a million ways in all the millions of films that I've seen, but I've never seen it done this way. You know what I'm saying? Is that's what it really takes. It's like if you go back to perfect your craft, to give your craft a foundation.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead,
I did not actually go back to school after U of C, but also I didn't have a skill set void. I just didn't realize that the skills I had were worth anything, or that like being able to like listen to a song and say like the song is really good. I bet people would really like this, or following pop culture carefully enough to know what people might want.
Yeah.
That seems like a fun thing to do, but you know, you can turn it into something that's a career.
Yeah, I think a bunch of us have inadvertently built up a skill set around the things that we were really interested in, not realizing it. I work with designers, some of the best designers in the world, and I've never studied design. Certainly didn't at Chicago, right? We didn't have any classes on that. Haven't since. I went to business school and I went back to school to learn a whole different set of skills that I didn't have. The voids in my education were huge. So filling those in, can be through school, but it can also be through all the stuff you were saying, through reading, through going to, whatever you're into, going to film after film or show after show. I've read so many things about design. I've been following it for years, and I was just doing it because that's what I was interested in for the longest time. And before it even really occurred to me that that might be something that I, as someone who doesn't know anything about actually designing, could play a part in and could be helpful in. So listen to those, pay attention to the things that you're actually spending your time thinking about and doing. Outside, so much of your day is structured and scheduled. You've got so many classes, so much work you have to do, but you still find ways to. Some of you are starting to actually look a little nervous because you haven't been in the library for half a day now, and there's some sweating. But you still find a way to like go to shows and go to movies and seek out things that like you just love that you would do all day if you could.
It sounds a little cheesy, but let your passion guide you. I'm serious. Like, if you're interested in something, just go for it.
I mean, what I would add to that is I was thinking there's this line from Zora Neale Hurston where she says you have to go there to know there. And my recommendation would be just really immerse yourself in what it is that you like. I spent 2 years after graduate school in strategy consulting, and it was a terrible fit. I just didn't like it at all. And it's a longer story. The short version of it is that I got into contact with the CEO of Urban Outfitters, who was a UChicago grad, and said, hey, I love design. It's not at all my background. This is what my background is. Is there anything that I can do in retail? And he said, actually, no, there isn't. But if you're passionate about it, you can come to this company, but you have to understand you're going to start at the very, very bottom, which is what I did. And that lasted a couple of months, and I did a couple of different jobs at Urban Outfitters through the way, and then eventually got into the role that I'm in right now. But really, if there is some area that you like, just get into it. Start building up your track record and your credibility. It's going to help you out a lot more.
You'll probably find that you're good at it because you care.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. Exactly. Other questions?
More questions behind you? All
Lot in the
over.
back. Okay. Start moving back. There you go.
Just
yeah.
stand up.
Hi.
Hey.
I know
Hi.
this has been addressed a little bit, but I'd be curious to hear.
I'm sorry, could you say the first part of that again?
Oh, yeah. I know this has been addressed a little bit
Okay.
previously, but I'd be curious to hear from all of the panelists how you kind of exercised your creative muscles during your tenure in Hyde Park.
Good question.
Oh my God.
Lonnie? Want to start?
Well, when I was in school, it was 1977 to 1982, so it was the advent of punk rock, and
Next
there was,
next
there was
question.
no,
Yeah.
there was no, and I had an affinity for it. I was a popular person on campus. I was high profile. I was had a lot of friends. I had a lot of teachers who enjoyed me enormously. They either loved me or hated me. I tend to be a little bit of a polarizing figure, but I considered myself. I crowned myself a walking art piece. So I would, I shaved my head about the third year of college, third of the fifth years, because I have this perfectly beautiful round head. There's not a dent or a ding in it. And especially back when I was younger, it was particularly nice. So I shaved it, and I started gluing things to it and writing messages on it. I would go to class with messages to the teacher on it. Like, I really hated writing this paper. I would glue things. I did nails. I glued human hair in chunks. I would get like wigs, and I cut wigs apart and do like long pieces, circles of hair coming down.
Wait a minute, I have a quick question. You shaved your head and then put human hair back on it?
Well, just
that wasn't yours?
in very artful chunks. I shaved my eyebrows, and I would make like a unibrow of sequins and go to class. Borges, the Argentinian writer, came and spoke at the University of Chicago, and we were told he's mostly blind, but we were told he could only see the color yellow. So my friends and I, we went to go hear Borges speak. We painted our bodies yellow and sat in the front row. So we considered it. There was, especially because of the whole punk rock thing, there was nothing that was illicit. There was nothing that was too severe. You could not be severe enough. And of course, you have that whole layer of intellectualism on top of it. So we were very intellectual punks. It was very extremely well done, So it was a constant experimentation, a constant willingness to shock, a constant willingness to, I remember I slept with this guy after a frat party, and he didn't particularly want to be associated with the bald girl, but he still wanted sex with the bald girl. So I had sex with him. And I was walking across the
Our
quad.
experiences were so similar. I did like the same thing. It's so weird.
So if you want to make it.
All right, yeah, here's the
But he said to me as I was leaving, he said, "Now, well, if you see me on the campus, don't let anybody know that I know you. And I looked at him like, wow, you have so said that to the wrong girl, right? So he's walking across campus with his Phi Gam. I don't know if any of you guys are Phi Gam, but... So he and his little Phi Gam buddies were walking across the quad, and I was walking towards them, two of my friends, and he got close, and he kind of like darted, looked at me, and I spit on the ground right in front of him, right? I do know you, and I'm spitting on the ground, you know, he's like, whoa, and his buddy's like, whoa, you know, they're all like coming at me, and I'm like, oh, gee, you know. So there was that kind of feeling of, there was no, I was absolutely willing and deeply engaged in being transgressive. You know, absolutely willing that if there is a boundary, I am going to cross it. I'm going to compulsively cross it. You know, that, and now I've mellowed a little bit, but I still do a fair number of transgressive things, like in my community. I mean, I don't know if any of you are from the North Shore of Chicago. I'm not so typical. You know, if you walk around Upper Winnetka, you're not going to see a lot of people just like me. You know, it's the kind of thing where, what I find that does, getting back to the very first gentleman's question, is that I definitely had a persona that was built. I was wearing in Catholic grade school in second grade 1 orange socks and 1 red sock. It was required to wear red. I had an orangey red sock, and I wore the orangey red sock because I was going to refuse to wear 2 red socks, and that was in 3rd grade. So this is something that was not just an affectation. There was something very deeply ingrained with me where I did not want to be like everyone else, and it did not bother me to not be like everyone else. You know, so that kind of opens you up. When you have that mind frame, you'd be surprised the experiences in your life that opens you up to. So things, you have developed this persona. When I sold paintings, you know, I never had a client say no. I always got the price I wanted, and it was a force of personality. It's okay to display your personality. There may be some of you, I had a friend who read me some of the reviews from last year and the year before. There are some of you who don't like me right now. There are some of you who think I should not be on this panel. There are some of you who think like, okay, that didn't give me the facts I need about what I need to do. You know, and you know, frankly, what I know from 30 years ago, these people here are going to be much better at telling you, people who've been out 2 years and 4 years and 6 years, to tell you about the current state of affairs. You know, I'm 30 years out. How many years out are you? So we're more out. So I'm coming at you from more a philosophical bent. And what I'm going to tell you is one thing really crystal clear. Money does not equal happiness. There's a whole lot of people who've sat in a whole lot of rooms that are really believing that the dollar sign is going to give them human satisfaction. It will not. There have been studies that show $75,000 is your break-even point. If you have less than that, you can tend to be still kind of unhappy. You can tend to still kind of struggle with some bills. Once you hit $75,000, your level of happiness, you could win the lottery tomorrow and have $500 million, and if you're kind of a sour person, you will be a sour person within a year. Money is not going to do it. If you are motivated by money, you're in the wrong field.
You're at the wrong school, too.
Well, no, not necessarily. Depends what you're studying. So not that, and I'm sure these people, many of them, and my previous panelists, my 7th panel, I've had Alex Seropian, you know what, $500 million when he was 22 or whatever. There is money that can come from the creative arts. There is no doubt. I've made a lot of money as a painter. But part of it is that cannot be the reason why you're sitting in this chair. If you want to be a writer because you think you're going to cash out, don't know that his show is really interested in you. It's not the proper motivating force. He's like, well, actually. But you know, it's not the proper motivating force, and it will not buy you. If you can find something that is meaningful, you know, meaningful and deeply engaging, if you can find something that will do that for you. I sat at lunch. I love the lunch round tables in some ways. I don't like them another way, but I like them in some ways. What I like about it is I ask people, so what are you studying? Well, I'm pre-med. Oh, okay, cool. Why are you at the entertainment? Well, because and you say, oh, I'm pre-med, and they kind of have a little look on their face. Well, my mom really wants, or my dad, well, you know, I'm so much student loan debt, and well, I'm going to go to med school or law school, a lot of pre-law. I think I'm going to go to law school. It's not good. You can do anything with your law degree. True. And I said, so, well, why are you at the entertainment lunch round table? And they said, well, because, and their face completely transforms. They said, because I really would love to be a writer. And I look at them, and they go from frowny to smiley. And I go, you know, pay attention to what literally happened to you. Look at what happened to your face. That's not an accident. You smiled when you talked about writing. You have to figure out how to tell your mom and dad that you're a writer and not a lawyer. And and that's a big scary thing, because you're looking at your student loan debt compared to mine. Mine looks like a cakewalk compared to what you guys are going to be walking away with, not to mention grad school. So part of it is, if you do grad school. So part of it is, I understand the pressure of like, well, that's all fine and good to talk about working for free, and how do I pay my student loans? And that's a really good question. I don't have a really great answer for that either, I'll be honest. But part of it is, I do know the difference between frowny face and smiley face. Smiley face will get you to where you want to be a whole lot more healthier. You could go to law school and you're gonna be an alcoholic who's very mean to his wife within 15 years, or husband. And I'm not kidding you. The rates of depression for people who are in fields that they do not properly belong in is astronomical. So it can be a real leap of faith at the University of Chicago. When they're opening up the new arts campus and stuff, the new arts center, this will get better and easier. I'm very thrilled that they're doing that. It is fabulous. It will be the single transformative thing that will change U of C. Kids, students who feel that they are perhaps artists will have, when I heard that they're building it, I got chills, because it will completely change it in many ways. So hope is on the way. I know I'm talking too long. Sorry, I'm a bit of a microphone hog, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We should have some more questions, unless anyone else wanted to talk about.
I wrote.
Yeah.
I did too.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fake ID and a friend with a car and went to a lot of shows.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Went to a million shows.
One thing somewhat related to what you were talking about with regards to money is that this is not really here nor there. But no matter what you do, whether you're creative or helping creative people, you're going to be working with money and making some sort of a deal, making deals, or needing to know how to negotiate. And there are like awesome introductory classes that UFC
That's
offers.
true.
My job exists because creative people don't know how to make deals
Yeah,
theoretically.
that's absolutely true.
No.
That's absolutely true.
And there's like whatever that intro to macro or microeconomics
Yep.
class that Alan Sanderson taught. And first
Yeah.
day of class, he's like, "This class will be the most important class you're to take at this school." And everyone's like, "Yeah, whatever, old man." But it total. I think about that class more than any other class I took combined. Just like learning how to think logically and economically not in like a snooty U of C way,
Yeah.
but just learning how to do it and learning how to think about opportunity costs and stuff like that. No matter what, you're selling paintings or clothes or your skills, you're going to have to think about things in terms of money, and it's good to know how to do it.
All right.
Question?
More questions.
Right there.
Up front, actually, you had your hand up a couple times. Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Getting loud.
It's on.
Okay.
You just got to get close.
All right. As an English major, I was wondering, because of the kind of changes are happening to what people may be expecting in terms of product, do you think it's better to be a jack of all trades, such as your kind of, well, speaking mostly to you, to gain skills in, I guess, painting, or I personally think that I want to go the route of being a writer, but the way things are changing, should I somehow come up with some scheme to gain some film more or less like qualities, or anything to transform the genre that I am working in, or something of that nature? Or should I try to just mainly pursue being a master of that skill in and of itself?
Actually, I'll let maybe Scott, do you want to answer that, since you're the actual professional writer on the board right here now?
Sure. I actually have an opinion. This question comes up a lot, and there are two schools of thought. And in general, all of this, I would say as a disclaimer, is advice. There's a lot of different paths, and there's a lot of different answers to all these questions. My feeling is that it is better to be exactly who you want to be as an artist, as a writer, as whatever, and really define yourself. The jack of all trades route, whether I want to be a writer, well, maybe I should pick up a camera just so I have that skill. That's fine, and that's certainly a way to go. But in terms of hiring, if you're talking like people hiring you to be a writer or to be a painter or anything, they need to know exactly what they're hiring. I've worked for The Youngin, and I wrote for a sketch show on Comedy Central, and I'm working for Colbert. There's a very clear profile of who I am as a writer. Social and political satire. My agents don't bother, well, thankfully they don't have to bother pitching me for anything right now, but they don't bother asking me to submit for like, I don't want to offend any people who might know people at shows, at certain specific shows, but like I'm not going to be put up for romantic comedy punch-up work on screenplays. That's not who I am as a writer. So I'm in favor of defining yourself as an artist. That's absolutely not the only way to do it, though.
I also wouldn't, try not to put too much pressure on yourself. It seems like you may be creating this dichotomy where you're saying, well, what's the most pragmatic approach if I just do this one thing, or should I try and dabble so that if someone says, well, hey, can you help edit my short film? Well, I know a little bit about that, so I can do it. I would say, really be true to yourself. What are you passionate about? What do you really like? Follow that, and that's probably going to get you to where you want to go faster than a particular strategy of what's going to play the best in the market.
There's a simple answer, which sort of covers the field. Really, is that if you want to write, you should write. Okay, first and foremost. I mean, all of this other stuff is relevant in one way or another in terms of practicalities, in terms of where you may be in the kind of job that you're applying for. But if you don't write, there's no point in pursuing it. Yeah. In other words, you're not going to prepare yourself for writing by, as they were saying, dabbling in other fields or whatever. Not that dabbling, not that those foundations might not be relevant, but they need to be relevant to what you're writing, and that's really the apex, of the triangle. It all comes from the writing. It all comes from that. It all comes from doing the thing that you think you really want to throw yourself into. First thing is to throw yourself into it, and then you see if you've made the right decision.
Yeah. Nobody's gonna, at least in my experience, I've never gotten hired because I wanted to do it. I got hired based on my work. That's what it comes down to. So, and a lot of that work nobody paid me to do in the first place.
Exactly. You do it. You volunteer for various jobs. I know when I first started out with Kartemko and with Gordon and Jerry, it's like I said, let me edit that scene. Let me edit that scene. I had never edited. I just needed to learn how to operate this flatbed editing console at the time, the Steenbeck machine, okay? And once I learned how to do that, and I actually volunteered to edit it, and they looked at what I did, and it was like, he can do it. He can do it. And they said, let me edit the next scene. Let me do this. And one thing led to another, and I really discovered by doing what I was able to do. And there's nothing stronger than that. Than knowing in your own heart that you can do it. There's nothing stronger than that.
What else? More questions? There's
Who's
some in
had
the
their
back.
hand up for a while? I think I keep seeing this hand right
Yeah,
here.
go ahead, stand up.
Yeah, that's you. That's exactly you.
Okay. Because our education doesn't typically prepare us for work in the art fields, especially when you don't have a visual arts, music, or TAPS major, would it be hard for us to get internships or even just a job after school? Any advice?
I think when you work for free, you're probably one of the most attractive candidates. And unfortunately, in the arts industries, a lot of times the internships are unpaid.
Yeah.
For me, having interviewed a lot of interns and assistants, one of the most attractive characteristics is someone who walks into the room, is ready to roll up their sleeve, do anything, have their finger on the copier machine for 6 hours of the day, and someone who is able to express themselves very articulately and and is just well-grounded. And I think there is a big divide. We were talking about this, some of the panelists before. There's a big divide between what you learn in school and what you acquire in the workforce in terms of experience. But I think what you get from here are the tools, and I think that is what puts you at an advantage to some other students, because you're equipped with certain tools from your education that help you in the workforce.
We have an elaborate sort of internship program at Cartemquin Films. All you need to do is go online to cartemquin.com, and there are applications and so forth. And the reason I'm mentioning it is that, in response to the question, is that we have interns from all over the Chicago area, from the University of Chicago, from Northwestern, from the Art Institute, from Columbia College, and many of them are not studying film. Many of them are studying, various, academic subjects that plug into the kinds of films that we make, whether it be sociology, history, politics, literature, philosophy, whatever. And when they come, to repeat what was just said a moment ago, they are willing to do anything, and they do anything. And there's so much to be done around a film studio. There are floors to be swept. There are groceries to be bought. And just being in that environment and sort of like opening yourself to it is what really gives you a sense of what a place that actually does this stuff is about, how it works, how you can fit yourself in to where you're comfortable and where you can be productive and make a contribution.
You know what I would say in the corporate world, it's unfortunate, I think, there's an increasing degree of specialization today, where people kind of get fixed into these very specific roles that have backgrounds, educationally, where there's a technical kind of component to it. And to your question, I mean, there are some things, I guess, that, the training here might not necessarily lend itself to, whether that's like graphic design. But the truth is, I don't really think that there's any door that's closed to you at this point. And I wouldn't let yourself be defined by the fact that there is specialization.
Yeah. No, I think we've all had a lot of interactions with interns. You don't hire an intern out of undergrad for their experience, right? You don't even hire a graduate student intern based on their experience or the class that they took. We're not going to hire you to learn about our field because we think you're going to add to it day one and teach us about it, right? We're looking for people who are smart and eager and interested and just who, like Lonnie said, light up when they think about your company or the kind of work you do. That's what you look for. And there's no, and even when you hire someone who has 2 years, 3 years experience, 5 years experience, they're going to start pretty much from scratch when they go to your company, and they're going to learn how you do it there. And so you need someone who can change and can learn and can dig into something the way that you guys are learning to with each of your classes. So you may not be taking a class in the exact thing that you want to do this summer. That doesn't mean you're not ready for it. And I think we all have to remind ourselves and realize that. I think U of C students are often not as confident as they should be about the skills that they have. I think we're all, we can probably all attest to that as well. I think you're building up a tremendous amount of skills that many, many other people won't have, even if they've been studying, become experts as undergrads in a field. They don't know shit. Right, and they're going to start over. Oh, sorry. And I mean, that's true, right? And that's true in film. That's true in fashion. That's true in music. Maybe less in music.
Well, I was going to say that I forgot that I did this actually until just now, but I took a class at Columbia in the music business, and it was a huge waste of time. And we get intern applications all the time from people who come out of their music business program, and they're no more meaningful or meaningless than any other applications we get.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, a couple more questions. I know there's a couple in the back right now. Let's look at those. Okay.
Hi, I think one of the biggest fears that we have as an undergrad is the lack of certainty and conviction in what we're about to pursue. So when you compare yourself now to yourselves 20, 30 years ago, do you think it's gotten better? Like, do you feel, maybe 10 years, sorry. Sorry, I was looking at this side.
That's
No
okay.
offense.
And that is the side you should look.
Do you feel like, not settled, but more certain of your directions? Like, does it get better? That's what
That's a really difficult question.
Yeah.
You know, I can speak for myself. When I was just leaving school, I think the transition was I went from looking for approval or direction externally. You know, maybe my parents were going to give me permission to be creative. I would kind of float these ideas to them and to other people. I'd say, well, I generally want to work in a creative industry. What do you think I should do? And I think the transition that took place is that went from a process that I was externalizing to one where I just said, you know what, this is something I've got to do. And it became very internal. And what other people thought really just didn't matter at all to me. And I mean, it's a personal experience. I don't know if would necessarily be anybody else's, but I think it does. It does get a lot easier. You become much more self-assured, much more directed. For some people, it happens immediately, right after college. It didn't for me. It took a little bit longer, but it does happen.
It helps, I think, if you can discover the source of intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation. I tend to find, and without being too facile about it, that if you are able to be engaged in something that is intrinsically motivating to you, the extrinsic rewards will follow your intrinsic motivational drive. I'd like to very quickly give you 5 books that I'm reading right now that are extremely influential, so write fast because I'm going to talk fast. One is Martha Nussbaum, professor of law at the law school, Not-for-Profit, Why Democracy Needs the Humanities. Unbelievable book, especially for those in the creative arts. Second, brilliant, by the top motivational psychologist maybe in the world, Carol Dweck from Stanford. It's called Mindset. It has to do with how you approach success and failure, how you accept failure as a chance to get better and grow, or if you view failure as the end of the line. Another book, fabulous, and I've now met her 3 times this year, which is Patti Smith's book out about her life with Robert Mapplethorpe in New York, Just Kids. If you want to get a snapshot of what's it like to be an artist, granted, it's not ever going to be like when Patti was there in New York, but boy, what a book if you're looking for some inspiration. Another book, poetry, just because, Mary Oliver, her book Swan, unbelievable. And last, just from the kind of management consultant field, advertising world, marketing world, Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, wrote a book called Start With Why, and I'll leave you with that one point. He talks about how people don't buy what you make or how you make it. He talks about Apple a great deal, actually. They buy why you do it. The reason why people buy Apple and not Dell is because when you're buying Apple, you are buying a culture and a mindset. You are not buying necessarily the product. It's almost incomprehensible that you would buy a phone from a computer company. Why would you ever do that? You know, the reason is because when you're buying your iPad, you're not buying just the iPad, you're buying what Apple represents. They have so tremendously successfully sold you why they are in existence. So if you can extrapolate that down and think about why you want to do something, not how you're going to do it, not how beautiful the things are designed, not what you sell, and especially if you don't start with, well, I studied blankety blank blank and my GPA was blankety blank blank and then I had an internship. That's all very statistical. It's fabulous. Isn't that lovely? But really what they're more interested in, and they get at this from other responses today, which is what they're really going to look for is if you have some sense of why the hell you want to do the thing that you are attempting to do. That can be, I might add, not an easy thing to determine. I'm not suggesting that figuring out why you want to become a writer is necessarily simple. You'd be surprised the dead-end alleys you can go down thinking about why, but especially if you end up being in product, you know, if you end up creating something. I'm sure Victoria, you know, when she talks about how she sells her lines of clothing, she isn't necessarily saying like, oh, this incredible, I mean, she also probably says this in fabrics, etc. She's not necessarily talking about the what's and the hows. She's talking about, you know, she's setting up, and I don't even know if any of this is true, but let's say hypothetically it's true, that you know, you talk about what is it when a person is buying something for you. I do it when I'm selling paintings. You know, why are they buying a painting from me? It's not really, I'll be honest, it's not because I'm like the best painter in the world. I'm a great painter, but I'm not like, you know, they're buying it for, well, I do a whole little mind, you know. Another great book, Pam Meyer wrote a book that's really fabulous called Lie Spotting. Might have been helpful today.
jump in. with-
Spouses lie to each other 12 times a day, at least, at as minimum. So everybody lies to everybody. You've been accepting. I bet we've all lied at some point in this conversation. It's a thing. If you can spot, it can be very helpful when you're working with people to see when deception is at play.
Jump in with a quick.
Please.
I know because this is a little side note, but I know we're almost done here. My contact info on there, my email. If you have other questions, great. Don't use that email though. My personal email is, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud to people, but.
Which means you better write it down,
yeah.
right?
Scott E. Sherman, all one word, at Gmail. If you send it to my work email, it'll get buried. Yeah, that's all.
That was nice of you, Scott.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
Is there one more?
Yes,
There's one in the
please.
back.
All the way in the back.
You're very patient. Thank you. You guys are hang in there. Almost done.
Great questions, too, by
Yeah.
the way.
So this one's kind of specific to sports. I was wondering if any of you knew anything about the sports side of entertainment. And then also, Scott, I saw that you were working with the Onion Sports Show. So if you could speak a little bit on that as well.
Could you repeat that question?
She wanted.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to know a little bit more about the sports side of entertainment, if
Mhm.
any of you knew about that, and if Scott could speak on the Onion Sports Show.
Yeah, I don't actually really have much to say about it. I contributed to it, as I said, in there, but enjoy it. There's not a lot to discuss on that specific
Does anyone else
project.
have sports?
I would guess that it's similar to any other field in
Yeah.
entertainment where
Yeah.
it's kind of the same people doing the same roles, but slight variations, and you start from the bottom and work your way up.
Yep. People I've known who've worked at ESPN or Nike have had that same kind of passion. They are athletes. They love it. Like all they think about is running or football or whatever it is, and that's part of what drives them. Same way that the things we've been talking about drive us and make our jobs, not even most of the time, feel like jobs. So with that, I think we're going to close, but we are here and we're happy to chat with you guys afterwards. So if you had a question, you didn't get to ask it, if you just didn't want to ask a question for whatever reason, but just want to talk to us a little bit more, please come up. We're going to be here for a little bit. We're happy to talk to you. Our contact information is in the books. Please contact us. We're happy to talk to you over email afterwards. Thank you guys for sticking with this. Thanks for coming out.